for all being here today. This is amazing. I'm very excited to share this moment with you. And it's a special moment. It's a special moment because as an Oxygen Advantage Master Instructor, I'm only here to facilitate you to become better instructors. And as a master, I'm supposed to make the method even better. Like Patrick made Buteyko better and made Oxygen Advantage, I'm lifting Oxygen Advantage up, and I'm doing it through neurology. And I'm going to show you very simple brain activation techniques today that will drastically improve your ability to facilitate your clients to get them to the place that they want much, much faster. And I would even say like 50% faster. That's what I've seen. So I've been a breathing instructor now for 7 years. I got my start in October. Well, it's almost 8 years. I got my start learning from the incomparable Lois Laney, who's a neurologist, and she's sort of a god in the neurology world. She's been doing this for 40 years. And in 2024, I took a year-long program with her, and I learned neurology from a brainstem perspective. Whoops, we're hearing noise. Okay. So once I started to look at breathing from a brainstem perspective, everything started to change for me and for my students. And after I became certified from Lois almost 8 years ago, as fate would have it, I got an email from the Oxygen Advantage because all of a sudden I was interested in breathing, and my higher self led me to the Oxygen Advantage. And then I became certified with Patrick, and I think I was in his 3rd class ever with Tom Heron and Shahid Aziz, who's probably on both of them are on these calls. Let me minimize the window. I'm not going to actually look at everybody. I'm just going to look at the camera. And so I've been teaching breathing for 7 years. And what happened for me was that I was the worst breather you can possibly imagine. I wrestled for 30 years. I've been choked thousands of times. I've been hit in the head hundreds of times. I've had 4 concussions. I've had 2 near drownings. And I was an aggressive, emotionally stunted person because of the sport I played. And that led to me not being able to breathe well because I was bent over, hunched, I couldn't breathe, and everything I did was upper chest breathing. I was locked in a paradoxical breath. So when I breathed in, I would go, my bottom hand would go backwards and my shoulders would lift up. And that is about as bad as it can get. And over the 8 years I've been doing this, I literally have only met one other person who is as dysfunctional as I was. So I began my Oxygen Advantage journey. And back then, Patrick gave you a really big book, like this thick. And basically, because he was touring the world and trying to get Oxygen Advantage out there and certifying as many people as he could. So it's basically like, congratulations, you're certified, good luck. There were no refresher classes. There were no master's meetings in Galway. That happened much later. So I had to fend for myself. And it wasn't easy because for the first year and a half, I struggled mightily. You can only imagine, being as bad a breather as I was, how hard it was to overcome these neurological, biochemical, and biomechanical issues because I'm about to be 56. So I started this when I was 48. Yes, 48. And from that moment, I had to really learn myself. I had to learn what to do. How do I take care of myself? So as a wrestler, I was dedicated. So I became the best student I could possibly become on myself. And I wasn't even teaching it to people. And I think a lot of instructors out there, you might feel sort of self-conscious when you first start. You're like, oh my gosh, there's so much science. How do I convey that? Don't worry about conveying science. Do it to yourself. Practice on yourself because that's going to be your best teacher. Unless you want to give presentations to corporations and teach certifications as a master, the science isn't really going to come into it because the people that are in front of you, they don't want to know it and they can't understand it. So it's always going to be more about a sensorial approach, a feeling approach. I'm not even good at reading scientific papers. I don't like it. My human design is not strategic. I'm a performer. I do things in the moment and I really work on myself because luckily I'm living the embodiment of what my sole purpose is, and that's health and wellness. And thank goodness I've been led to this path and I'm supremely planted in this path. And my goal is to continue to make Oxygen Advantage the best breathing company in the world because we are. And I'm hoping to elevate it. So, as I anguished for years, I finally, during COVID, I started to turn to the internet and started to teach people online. So I started to see more people. And as I saw more people, I put more puzzle pieces together. I found what worked for certain people. Like you heard Patrick in the certifications that he threw a man into a panic attack from breathing light. He's like, what's going on here? I'm showing him an exercise that's supposed to calm you down, and this man's going into a panic attack who's got to be rushed to the ER, even though nothing bad happened to him. Well, in neurology, we can actually tell you why that happens. So a lot of the answers that we don't have sometimes in Oxygen Advantage you're going to be able to actually answer them with what I teach you today, which is a stingy bolt or a bolt score. Somebody you see got a bolt score of 45 seconds, but all of a sudden they can't hold their breath for more than a minute and 20. They can't double it because they can't regulate pressure in their brain. And that's where it starts. It starts in the brain. So that's a little bit of my entry. And now I want to share my screen and pull up the presentation that you're all going to be using at the end. This will be emailed to you. So I always forget how to go full screen. It doesn't matter. Where's my little, anyway, it doesn't matter if you can see the slides on the side. So brainstem breathing. Everybody here wants to know, how do you improve cognitive performance and mental focus? And I'm going to show you today how you can do that. So your cranial nerves are your powerhouses. And they're located, there's 12 of them. There's a left and a right. So when we do anything on the face, we're only affecting that. So right brain controls left body, but not on the face. Right nostril, right brain. Left nostril, left brain, because you have a pair of olfactory nerves on the left and the right. So you can see right there the olfactory, you have two of them. So your brainstem, located at the base of your brain, is a crucial region that's responsible for controlling these essential functions, which includes breathing, and that's why we're here today. Within the brainstem, there are specialized groups of neurons and centers that regulate the respiratory process. So, I had made myself into a fantastic breath holder. Literally a year ago, I went on the track because I've been practicing breath holding for 5 years and I'm dedicated. I would take maybe a day or two off a week. I was always practicing my breath holds because that's what I am. I'm a doer. I'm not diving into the science, I'm feeling it. So I was able to run 240 meters without breathing and recover in 10 seconds, which was epic, but my bolt score never really moved. Sometimes I would touch 50, but most of the time it would drop back down into 30 someday. Some days I'd be 40, but it was never consistently going up. It would always drop back down. So when I was doing my 12-month program with Lois, she put me on a machine. It was a capnography machine, cannula in my nose, and she tested what my end tidal CO2 numbers are. Now, for our experience, that's the most important blood marker, and it's the hardest to test because you have to wear some sort of contraption. I think Calibre is the only one out there that's doing it. It's like $500. I'm not even sure if it works the way it should, right? You have to buy a very expensive machine. So you want to know what your end tidal EtCO2 numbers are at the end of your breath, which is how many millimeters of pressure, of mercury pressure is left. So when she put me on the machine, she had me breathe for like 3 minutes. And she said, what do you think your numbers are? What do you think are good numbers? I said, well, 32 to 37 is what medical textbooks say is normal, but it's not. 32 to 35 is below average. 35 to 37 is average. 37 to 40 is good. 40 to 44 is excellent. She said, congratulations. What do you think you are? Now, this is after 5 years of practicing breath holding. I go 38.5. So she takes a snapshot of the screen, and I was passively at 35. And I had just done breath holds that morning. So even though I was able to influence myself to become a better breather, it took me 6 months to learn how to breathe through my nose because I was never regulating pressure very well from all the damage to my head. I had damaged my cranial nerves, and they're the key component involved in this regulation of pressure, and they're in the medulla oblongata, which is the base of the brainstem. It's your primal brain. There's nothing more important than the brainstem. And it plays a vital role in generating and controlling our bioelectrical signals, which are necessary for respiration. And the process of breathing begins here. So the first thing we're going to look at is the olfactory nerve. Now, we do that all the time. We start off with many small breath holds. We unblock the nose. We're preparing the airway. We're slowly increasing our tolerance to carbon dioxide. We're producing nitric oxide, and many of us are going to feel an open nose. I've had many people also do those exercises and say, have them check again. Well, I don't feel like I'm breathing any better. And I'm like, okay, it takes time. Well, your cranial nerve, number one, is your organization nerve, and smell goes directly to your limbic center, which we talk about in OA. How do you calm yourself down, right? The amygdala. So when we do same side nostril breathing, which is the cornerstone of pranayama, what happens is, let's say I block, you can all do this with me right now. You can all block your nose. When you cover your nose, you just gently cover the nose. You cannot apply pressure or your trigeminal nerve takes over. So as you sit there and you breathe comfortably, you're going to notice compression, or some of you might say, no, I'm 100% open. I've never had anybody tell me they're 100% open. So as you sit there and you breathe through one nostril, what's actually happening is, because I was blocking my right, so my left brain hemisphere is waking up just from single side nostril breathing. It's activating all the cortices of my brain, and it's switching on all 12 cranial nerves in order, because the smell organizes everything in your brain. So when you do same side nasal breathing and then you activate it with smell, you get mental clarity and enhanced focus, because you're activating the nerve that controls your ability to open your nose, smell the world, sense the world, and it's your most primal sense. So it's very important. And you could see all these neurons, all these nerves right here, right? So now we're going to move on. Not that the nose is not important, but you guys, as Oxygen Advantage, you know the nose. You know all the 30 functions of the nose. You know what it does. So what we're going to do when we get to the practical part is we're going to stimulate that nerve first. Now we're going to move to my favorite nerve, the glossopharyngeal nerve. So this is number 9. And your glossopharyngeal, and what I teach people is that it's your lifeline, because it plays the most vital role in your essential functions, such as swallowing. What do I mean by that? Have you ever been running and you're trying to breathe, but you're also getting phlegm going down your throat, or your nose is running, and all of a sudden you're like, and you can't swallow, right? As you're running really hard, it makes it very difficult. And then what happens? Your mouth opens. And your mouth opens because your brain senses that you're in autonomic distress. Every time your mouth opens, you're going into a deficient state. Now, there's an athlete in the world, Israel Adesanya, who not champ anymore, WBC, UFC champ, and he fought his last 3 fights before he lost the last one. And Joe Rogan even commented, wow, he's not breathing through his mouth. He kept his mouth closed the entire fight. And when he went in the middle of the rounds, he didn't sit down and his mouth never opened. And he works with, I forgot Dave something. He's a paramedic in New Zealand and he does great stuff. So this nerve is regulating swallowing, speech, and your blood pressure, which is what we care about in order to stay calm when we're running harder. So we breathe less hard, deeper, and slower instead of faster. You want to be a cheetah. So sometimes the things pop up on the screen, I can't see it. So the glossopharyngeal nerve is transmitting sensory information from the back of your throat. Here's another example. Somebody's really stressed out, they're at work and they go, they want to talk and they go, you ever see somebody and they go, they have to swallow in order to talk because they're in a stress state and the swallow calms you down because the brain will sense safety. Okay, I can close down my airway, I can open my throat, and I can swallow. It's all about recreating natural function, which we'll talk about later too. So as it transmits sensory information from the back of the throat and your taste buds, which you're going to use lemon concentrate to do, it contributes to the reflex regulation of your heart rate and your blood pressure and your heart rate variability because you're an electromagnetic being. I love Dr. Huberman, but he even says, I'm looking at biochemical processes. They want mechanical answers as scientists. I'm going above that. I'm saying that the bioelectrical dimension is actually dimension number 1, and biochemical is number 2, biomechanical is number 3, and the psychophysiological dimension is number 4, or we can keep them at 1, 2, and 3. And in Chinese medicine, we look at the brain as a special organ. So the brain is regulating all your bodily processes, and it does it through electrical conductivity, not through oxygen and carbon dioxide. You have to have the right electricity in order to regulate the balance of carbon dioxide and oxygen. So what does the glossopharyngeal nerve do? It safeguards your airway during swallowing by controlling your gag reflex. You can try it right now. You could take your finger, you could stick it in your throat all the way to the back. If you gag, you have a gag reflex, and that means your glossopharyngeal nerve is not working, or of course it's working, otherwise you wouldn't be alive. It's underperforming. So your gag reflex should happen when things pass the uvula, but you should have no gag reflex in your mouth. And there are techniques for that we're not going to do today. It also coordinates breathing and swallowing based on sensory input from your throat. It monitors your oxygen levels and it influences respiratory regulation. And it intimately works with the vagus nerve. We're only going to very smallly touch on the vagus nerve because as Oxygen Advantage Master Instructors, you know a lot about the vagus nerve, but you don't know a lot about the glossopharyngeal nerve, and that's your lifeline. So there's a lot of people, or not people, there's a lot of techniques now, a lot of machines that target the vagus nerve. But if 9 isn't working and you can't regulate pressure, then vagus is not sensing safety. And that's important. Safety is what's important. And we don't teach athletes about safety, but I teach my athletes safety. I work with many Olympians. I have elite athletes from every sport, and they have tremendous success now once they've learned to activate their brain, and then they can regulate pressure. And they're noticing that even at the end of the game or the end of the match, they're not getting tired. And they're mostly breathing through their nose, at least when they're off the field, right? Because a lot of athletes will have to open their mouth, which isn't very good, but it will help you to maintain breathing and not get tired. But I believe that it is possible because Israel Adesanya showed us you could breathe through your nose the whole time. And the cheetah and the antelope do not have their mouth open when they're running at full speed. The horse doesn't even know how to breathe through its mouth. If it breathes through its mouth, it's close to death. So we don't want to breathe through our mouth. We want to perfect our ability to nose breathe at all times. What are the sensory branches of the nerve? So here's a little bit of the science that I know you guys love. Here comes the glossopharyngeal nerve. It's coming out of the base of the brainstem, out of the medulla, and it has branches. So the top part is going up here to your parotid gland. You're going over to the tonsils. This is your glossopharyngeal nerve coming down to your carotid body. You're going to see more of that in the next slide. So let's talk about these branches. Your tonsillar branch. So when people have inflamed tonsils, I can teach them exercises that can actually stimulate the tonsils to retract. That's right. They don't have to come out. They can retract. The reason that they're engorged is because the cranial nerves are not working in sequence. And there's 12 of them, and they have 93 functional possibilities. And that means there's a septillion amount of possibilities. So when we activate these nerves and we get them working in sequence, natural function comes back to the body. And then, of course, if we train breathing, which is a motor program, we can make progress faster. So look where that nerve goes, to the tonsillar branch. I mean, it's so cool that it's innervating these tonsils. And then you have your pharyngeal branch, which innervates the mucous membrane of the pharynx. So when you're running and you're like, and you got to spit, it's because most people are breathing through their mouth. So that nerve is underperforming. It can't do its job because you're off-gassing all this carbon dioxide. You're not regulating pressure. And now your back of your throat isn't working. So you're starting to get phlegmy. Your lingual branch, right? It's the branch that provides taste sensation, which is right here, which is the posterior third of the tongue. And we're going to activate that with lemon concentrate during the practical part. So we can activate with sense, with touch and taste, and we can get this nerve working so the back of the throat stays open and the airway stays open. So what you can do is you can look in the mirror, you can take a flashlight, you can put it to the side, you can go like this in the mirror, and you want to see, number one, can you and does the back of your throat open? Most people are going to have one open higher than the other. We're not going to talk about that. But can the back of the throat open and the airway shut down, and then the airway open and the throat shut down? Natural function. They have to work in conjunction with one another so we can breathe through our nose consistently and not need to breathe through our mouth. I don't have to breathe through my mouth. It doesn't matter how hard I'm going, what I'm doing. I don't ever have to breathe through my mouth. It's pretty cool because it took me 6 months to get to breathe just through my nose. Then we're looking at the carotid branch, the sensory branch, which is what you guys really care about because of breath holding and slow breathing. And it supplies sensory fibers to your carotid body and your carotid sinus, and it plays a role in monitoring our blood pressure and our oxygen levels. Now, look at this, the glossopharyngeal and intermittent hypoxic hypercapnic training. During the hypercapnic breath hold, the glossopharyngeal nerve plays the most critical role, and it responds to elevated carbon dioxide levels in the blood, particularly through its connection to the carotid body. Boom, here we go. You got your carotid body right here. So it's sensing blood pressure changes. If that nerve isn't working properly, your heart rate's going to go through the roof, right? I test everybody's heart rate. Athletes have low heart rates, but they have low heart rates, but they also have low heart rate variability. because they're overtrained and they're breathing through their mouth. So chemoreception, we all train this. We all work on this. Your carotid body contains specialized chemoreceptors that are monitoring your blood gases. And when these levels rise, the carotid body detects this change. But like myself, I was doing many breath holds for 5 years, but my Bolt score was never changing, even though I was able to regulate pressure better because I was constantly training breath holding. It wasn't influencing my sleep. My sleep was terrible. My HRV was 15. In the last year and a half that I've been activating my brain on a daily basis, which is like 535 straight days, I've now increased my HRV all the way up to 60. And 60 is not high, but it says average for my age. 60 is not high, but it shows how dysfunctional my nervous system was from my years of overtraining and being choked and being in a stressed state from overbreathing. Now we want the activation of the nerve. Those nerves transmit through the carotid branch. They get signals from your carotid body to your brainstem, notifying it of your increased CO2 levels. So what I've noticed with athletes is that I have a swimmer. He's about to compete in the World Championships at the end of this month. And when I started training him, his Bolt score was 16 seconds because he's a swimmer. So he does a little bit of controlled breathing, 16 seconds. And his first breath hold was 36. Now his Bolt score is in the 50s and he's holding his breath for 3 minutes. And it was because he's practicing his evolution brain activation exercises every single day. So you want to put yourself, it's like, I consider it like I've been training breath holding for 5 years, but I feel like I was brushing my teeth with no toothpaste. I forgot the toothpaste. We're not going to forget the brain anymore. It's going to be the forefront of how we organize our exercises and our routines for our athletes and for ourselves. It's going to control respiratory regulation. So the brainstem processes this information and it initiates compensatory responses. And typically this includes an increase in respiratory drive to enhance ventilation. So when I'm running harder and faster, I still tell my athletes, I don't care how hard you're moving, I want you to breathe as slow as you possibly can so you can go harder and faster, so you're tolerating the buildup of lactate. So when Matthew, my swimmer, had his lactate tested, and this was like 3 months ago, he was at almost 19, and they were like, wow, you're tolerating a huge buildup of lactate. That's what we want, right? So if we have goals of running a marathon or running a 5K as fast as we want, we have to be able to tolerate lactate. And it works. The Oxygen Advantage exercises work. We are able to tolerate lactate. I was able to run 240 meters, but those are motor aspects of a sensory issue. So my sensory cortex, where these nerves sit, still were underperforming. So no matter how much motor activation I did, it didn't change or improve the sensory part of my brain, the sensory cortex. It influenced it. I did feel better, but it didn't actually change the inputs. We need to change the inputs by activating the brain with very simple techniques. So it's also going to influence our heart rate. But forget about heart rate variability, right? So the activations I show you are going to activate these nerves. They're going to gain more energy. Think of sticking your phone into the wall. You see the battery life going up. So this is what you're doing. You're actually going to increase the battery life of your body, of your brain stem, and then it's going to transfer to all aspects of your life. Then you're going to have much more energy. Your Bolt score is going to be higher. You're going to notice your nose is more open, and you're going to be effectively breathing through your nose while you're running. And then you're going to get less tired. So you're going to be able to do more work and be more efficient with the work you do. Now we got to talk about the motor branch of the glossopharyngeal. So The stylopharyngealis is the most important muscle because it's going to open the airway. So when you go, ah, you want to see the airway lift. You want to see the whole throat lift. Now, I have people, and sometimes I've seen airways that don't move. And those people are struggling. There might still be good athletes, but they're struggling. I had a world champion, a 6-time world champion, telling me, Bryan, I willed myself to the last world championship. Of course you did, because you're an athlete. You've been wrestling for 35 years. You know how to wrestle. So there's that drive and determination and that push. But that push, his HRV was in the tank and he wasn't sleeping well and he couldn't breathe, right? We're told we have a deviated septum. You only have a deviated septum because your brainstem is lessening in energy from emotional and physical traumas. And every time you experience a physical trauma, I want you to think of yourself as a house, and the house has a grounding rod on the top. So when the lightning strikes the house, the circuits blow, so the electrical system doesn't fry and the house doesn't burn down, and you have to go and you have to switch the circuits back on. That's what we're going to do. We're going to switch the circuits back on, and I've been doing this for 535 straight days. And when Lois tested my nervous system, she said, when you started with me, your nervous system was at 30%. 30%? That's not life. That's not feeling good. And I did feel good, but then I started to notice that I was feeling better and better. And I noticed that I was feeling better and better the 5 years that I did breath holding, but it hit a limit for me. I wasn't feeling any better, even though I was holding my breath longer, because I've held my breath for 5 minutes. And when I started, my Bolt score was 5 seconds, and my strong breath hold was 23. So now we can influence these circuits to increase their electrical conductivity, which helps us to regulate pressure, which allows us to have more mental clarity and enhanced focus. And that's what it's all about, because that's what you guys said you wanted. So I've talked about the stylopharyngeal muscle. That's opening the throat, right? And these are the motor branches. So it's affecting all the motor branches of the muscles of the throat. And that's when we swallow. So when we want to see the throat open wide. And when we swallow, we want it to be like butter. We don't want to go have to struggle to swallow. So then you got your pharyngeal muscles, not the green, the orange, and the blue. And while the glossopharyngeal nerve doesn't directly control the pharyngeal constrictor muscles, it does provide motor innervation for coordinating these activities. And this is what I was talking about when you're running. I know people out there, when I said it, you're running and all of a sudden you start to get tired and you're like, you start to cough, you can't swallow, right? And that's when you should stop, because everything is going haywire in your brain. But most people would push through it. So overall, the primary function of the glossopharyngeal nerve revolves around the stylopharyngeal muscle to open the throat and its role in swallowing. Okay, that's the end of my presentation. I could talk to you for hours on the nerves, but we're not going to. So now we want to get into the practical part. Good, it was perfect, like 35 minutes is exactly what I had hoped to plan for. And I go off on tangents because that's me. I'm a doer, so I feel things. And I've worked with so many people that I can put everything into cohesive teachings because I've been doing it for so long. So now we want to talk about our nose again. So we need, now I don't know, there was a little blurb to tell you to bring stuff, but you're going to get the recording. So I'm just going to do this. The most important aspect of breathing is your nose, right? It's an organ. It's got 30 different functions, but it's got that nerve in there, which is your primal nerve. So what I do, if you don't have an inhaler, nasal inhaler, don't open it right now. I have big nostrils. So I actually insert it into my nose. But the first thing we want to do is we want to neutralize the trigeminal nerve. So we're going to take a stick. It cannot be, even a chopstick is too wide. So what we do is we take this stick and we put it in between our four front teeth. It can't be back here. It's got to be in the four front teeth because the trigeminal nerve is controlling that area. The trigeminal nerve is controlling the nostril flare on the inhale. As instructors, if you see somebody inhale and their nostrils go in, that's dysfunctional and reverse gear breathing. It might not show up in the belly, but it'll show up in the nostrils first. So look for that. So why do we put the stick in between our teeth? Because it neutralizes the trigeminal nerve, which is number 5. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but number 5 is like the planet Jupiter, and all other 11 nerves are like Mercury compared to Jupiter. And if this nerve is underperforming, then it's going to steal energy from all of the other nerves. So remember, you have 24 of them, 12 on one side, 12 on the other. If 23 of them are functioning at 100%, but one is functioning at 50, guess what? You're only as strong as your slowest cranial nerve, and your whole brain is at 50%. That's crazy, but it's true. So if your teeth touch when you're running, so here you are, you're running, or you're in the gym and you bite down on your teeth, which most people do, your trigeminal nerve gets stimulated, not activated, but stimulated to override all the other nerves that are devoted to regulating your blood gases and getting oxygen to your brain, your muscles, your organs, and your tissues. So it's very simple. We could put the stick in between our teeth, and what happens is we neutralize that nerve by ensuring the enamel never touches. Now, some people might say, what if I know I don't touch my teeth? You don't know that because non-conscious behaviors are going to pop up. So you got the stick in between your teeth and you start to, well, if you don't have the stick, you start to think about something and all of a sudden you bite down and you don't even know you're biting down. It happens automatically because there's a degree of tension in this nerve causing the teeth to bite down because there's been trauma that hasn't been not released, but moved past. I don't want emotional releases. I don't want to relive trauma. I want to move past it. I just need to move past, not have to experience it again, and then every day you wake up feeling better. So when you have the stick in between your teeth, trigeminal nerve is in neutral, tongue is on the roof of the mouth, that stabilizes your vagus nerve, and the pressure of the tongue is also activating the glossopharyngeal nerve. So you have your palate, you have your hard palate in the front, your soft palate in the back. The back, the soft palate, is where your glossopharyngeal nerve sits, and your vagus nerve is right on top of your glossopharyngeal nerve, which is why humming and swallowing are going to be very important in what we do. So actually, I should talk about humming and swallowing right now. So before we do activate our nerve, we're going to use a process of humming and swallowing. And we all, as Oxygen Advantage instructors, we know what humming does, but we don't know what swallowing does. So when we hum and swallow, after we do our activations, which we're going to do together, but I want to give you a little preface so you're not thinking about it when you're doing the techniques, we're turning on natural functions and we're recreating the sequence of the cranial nerves to fire in the right sequence. Because I can't get too much into it, but there's a sequence that happens as you inhale and a sequence in the nerves that happens as you exhale. So everything we're doing electrically through the cranial nerves and brainstem aims to increase oxygen flow. That's why it's the oxygen advantage. And nothing is more important. Humming increases oxygen to the brain by 18 to 20% due to the production of nitric oxide. And after you complete the hum, so when we do our exercises, on our exhale, on our final exhale, we hum. after the hum, we breathe in again, and then we invite our brain to swallow. And after we complete the hum, the wait time until the brain invites us to swallow allows the signals to complete a new circuit and the brain to become sensitized for interpretation. Now, as a runner, you're doing a 5K, you're getting to the last quarter mile and you're trying to run harder, and all of a sudden things are going fuzzy, or you trip, or you're not sensing where the finish line is, or you can't sense where there's a runner next to you. That's what we're going to improve. We're going to improve our ability to interpret the environment, because those cranial nerves activate our energy field. So we're going to improve the energy field, which gives us more sensitization to everything around us, because we can effortlessly breathe through our nose and swallow easily. But if a person consciously thinks about this process, the conscious brain takes over and true learning doesn't occur. So this process is entirely non-conscious, meaning that whether swallowing is easy or difficult, it indicates the tension within the nervous system. So some of us might do single-sided nostril breathing, we might hum, we might breathe in again, and we might go, we might have trouble swallowing, and that just indicates that there's tension in your nervous system, and these activations, over time, you'll start to notice that your swallow becomes easier. That's why I've been doing it for 530 days. My swallow's like butter now, but it also matters in positions. The brain is going to be different seated. I'm seated, so my brain is going to be different seated than it is lying down, than it is standing, than it is on one leg when I'm running. So we want to improve all the positions. So the timing of humming and swallowing is crucial, because it allows the signals to complete a new circuit and it enables the brain to interpret them. So at the end of the hum, you're going to keep breathing. You're going to end of the hum. You're going to breathe in through your nose, and then you're going to wait till your brain invites you to swallow. And your breathing and your patience will let the cranial nerves naturally open your throat to swallow. And we're going to avoid using any muscles to assist in the process. So if you have your stick, you're going to take the stick, you're going to put it between your teeth. If you have an inhaler, I like to put it in my nose, because that's my trigeminal nerve, and my airway is a tube. So my trigeminal nerve is not stimulated, it's activated because it senses a round tube. Or you can just take your thumb and block the air, but do not cause pressure in or up, because the cranial nerve, the trigeminal nerve, will become stimulated. So we just gently cover the flow of air. So you hold your hand away from your eyes and you just gently cover with your thumb pad your nose. And now what you're going to do is you're going to breathe in 4 times. So we're going to do it together. Now I have to talk while I'm doing this. So the brain needs 4 to 5 practices to learn. So I'm just going to breathe in as silently as I can. I'm going to inhale, and then I'm going to allow the air to leave my body effortlessly. Then I'm going to inhale. I'm going to allow the air to leave my body effortlessly. Then I'm going to inhale. Then I'm going to allow the air to leave my body effortlessly. And I'm going to inhale my final time. And then I'm going to initiate a hum using the H part. Breathe in again, silently. And now wait till your brain says, I can swallow. And that's completing a new circuit and helping your brain to interpret information. Remember, the stick is in between the teeth. Take your thumb on your other side. Don't block your eyes, and your eyes have to be open, and your eyes also have to be looking. Right now you're looking at the computer screen, but the computer screen might be down. If we look down, our brain thinks we're depressed. So we want our gaze horizontal. and we want to be looking at a target that makes our brain feel safe. If your eyes close, that's because your nose isn't working properly. So your brain said, shut down the optic nerve, because you have 12 million sensory receptors in your brain, and 11 million of them go through the eyes. The eyes have to be open. The brain wants to see what it's doing. So let's go to the other side. Let's inhale very silently. And we're not using a pace. So there's no in for 4. It's just a normal, gentle breath. We're trying to recreate natural function. Exhale effortlessly. Inhale silently. Exhale effortlessly. Inhale silently. Exhale effortlessly. Inhale final time. Initiate the hum with the H. Hum. Breathe in again. Invite your brain to swallow. When it swallows, it swallows. Don't force it. Don't use muscles. That switched on our hemispheres, activated all the cortexes, and it initiated a sequence to fire all 12 cranial nerves in order. Now we're going to use the olfactory nerve. We're going to open our inhaler, and we're going to do the same exact thing. We're going to take this inhaler. Actually, 1 second. So most of us are going to do this, right? And we're going to experience smell. Some of us, it might be very discombobulating. There's reasons for that. But your airway is so large that you should be able to take the inhaler and stick it all the way in your face. It took me 6 months to get here. I could do it on both sides. This was my deviated side. And my eyes are straight now. My nose is deviated, less deviated. So when I started on my right side, I couldn't get it in at all. So I basically, you start to go in, and then you should find a hole, and then you go this way. So it's a little bit of an angle, not straight back. Don't try to do it today. You can always spit on your finger, put it on the inhaler, and then find it. A lot of you are going to say, oh my God, that hurts. That's how compressed your airway is, because your cranial nerves aren't firing with enough electrical energy, so the airway collapses. That's why people have to continuously do nose unblocking. My nose is open all the time. I never struggle to breathe anymore. It's the best I've ever felt in my life. So let's take that inhaler. Let's make sure the stick is in the forefront teeth. Let's make sure that our eyes, hopefully I'm a safe space for you. So if you are looking at the computer, I'm a safe space. Or you look at a picture of your loved one or your favorite color. And now we're going to take 4 breaths. So ready? Breathe in silently. Exhale effortlessly. Breathe in silently. Exhale effortlessly. Breathe in silently. Exhale effortlessly. Breathe in final time. And hum. Breathe in again. Wait for your brain to swallow without you forcing the swallow. Switch sides. Switch sides. Ready? Silently inhale. Effortlessly exhale. Silently inhale. Effortlessly exhale. Silently inhale. Effortlessly exhale. Inhale your final time. And hum, hum. I use my mouth. Hum to hear you see the H. Breathe in naturally. Wait for your brain to invite you to swallow. And you take it out. Now, the third one is very, very important. Everybody who runs is going to be doing this. You're going to be tagging me on Instagram. Unfortunately, I'm not on Facebook, so I don't know what's going on in the group, but the only way to contact me is through Instagram. Now we're going to learn to breathe through pressure. What's the most important gas in our body? Well, there's two of them, carbon dioxide and oxygen. They are gasotransmitters. They're endogenous. We make them ourselves. So when we learn to breathe through pressure, pressure creates turbulence for turbinates inside the nose, the Rocky Mountains, that discombobulate the air, sterilize it, antifungal, antimicrobial, antibacterial, antiviral. So when I learn to breathe through pressure, I'm going to put the stick in, and then I'm going to, well, you could use your thumb, or I like to do this. Now you're going to breathe through pressure. Pressure creates turbulence, and turbulence manufactures more nitric oxide. When we do this technique, if you feel after one breath, if you start to feel suffocated or any panic, immediately stop. Never push through anything when it comes to the brain. We want safety at all times. The brain only knows three things. Namaste, I love you, I feel calm, and more importantly, I feel safe. That's why it's called the fight or flight response. You should be in the parasympathetic state every minute of your life until you initiate a fight or flight exercise or you need to get away from danger. So, inhaler in, block the nose, 4 breaths. If you need to remove it, I need you to stop before you feel any kind of bad feelings. Don't let the bad feelings come on. So here we go. Breathe in silently. Exhale effortlessly. Breathe in silently. Exhale effortlessly. Breathe in silently. Exhale effortlessly. Breathe in final time. Hum. Breathe in naturally. Wait for your brain to invite you to swallow to complete the circuit. Beautiful. Switch sides. Oh, it feels so good. I should put mine all the way in. So I could show you that I can breathe comfortably through pressure. Ready? Inhale silently. Exhale effortlessly. Inhale silently. Exhale effortlessly. Inhale silently. Exhale effortlessly. Inhale final time. Initiate your hum. Breathe in silently. Wait for your brain to invite the swallow to complete the circuit so you can interpret the world around you. Now, beautiful. Once you have your nose open, then you go to salt. And there's a picture that was sent out of where you touch your tongue with the salt. So when we use salt on the tongue, it's actually the beginning of the parasympathetic system. So we're going to use markers, and it's here. Sweet is here. Salt is here. So we're going to take that salt. So your facial nerve is responsible for innervating several muscles involved in the process of swallowing, particularly in the oral and pharyngeal phases of swallowing. And during the oral phase of swallowing, the facial nerve helps control facial muscles that are involved in mastication and bolus formation, which is getting that food, enabling it to swallow so it's in a nice lump so you don't choke on it. So in the pharyngeal phase of swallowing, the facial nerve coordinates with other cranial nerves and muscles to initiate the swallowing reflex. So when we sensitize this nerve, it helps us to swallow. It activates parasympathetic tone. So before you go running, you want to be in a parasympathetic state, just like a cheetah who's stalking the antelope, and it's still, it's not going, I'm going to go now. It's actually in stealth mode. It's in a parasympathetic state. You can't hear it breathing, and then it initiates a sympathetic response. So the facial nerve is getting us into the parasympathetic state. So I usually put it on my finger. You can dip your Q-tip, it's your salt. So you dip it in, you get it wet, you dip it in, and you're going to take the salt and you're going to go on both sides. However, your tongue needs to be in your mouth and you need to hum while you're doing it. And what you're going to do is you're going to rub it, and then you're going to finish on the roof of your mouth with the Q-tip. You're going to go 4 times, which tells the trigeminal nerve to also activate. So we're using salt on that part of the tongue to activate saliva. Saliva is parasympathetic energy. And then when we finish with tongue swipes on the roof of the mouth to teach the trigeminal nerve to stay in position so it doesn't steal energy from the other nerves. Now we move to the glossopharyngeal nerve, which I showed you in the presentation is the back third of your tongue. You could see those nerves innervating the back third of your tongue. Now in this one, I'm going to show you, I have, wrong glass. We're going to use lemon concentrate. You can use lemon juice, but it's not nearly as effective. The lemon has to be concentrated because most of our people's nerves are not performing very well because they're mouth breathing. And now we're losing hydrogen ions, we're losing energy. So what I do is I use 2 Q-tips and I activate both hemispheres of that nerve at the same time. So I'm going to stick my tongue out so you can see where to touch. Salt is here. Lemon is here. And then the tongue is in your mouth and you're humming. And then get the back third of the tongue. Get as much lemon on the back third of your tongue as you can. Notice what you're noticing. Is your airway feeling more open? Did it feel that way on the salt? Did it feel that way when you did single side nostril breathing? And then you go on the roof 4 times while humming. And then you swallow. That activates cranial nerve number 9, glossopharyngeal. Then we move to the vagus nerve. I didn't spend time on the vagus nerve because that's not what we're here for brainstem breathing. We're here for 7, 9, and 5. And of course 10, but we're not going to talk about it. So now 10 is at the back of the tongue, all the way to the back before the uvula. Now that I used to be like, oh, it would kill me. My nerves were so underperforming that those tastes would just blow me away. And now it's actually easy because I've been doing it for 535 days. We have one more little technique. Now to finish, to make sure the brain is in congruency, to align the left and the right hemispheres of the brain, we're going to keep our mouth closed with the stick in between our teeth, and we're going to take our tongue, the tip of our tongue, and we're going to draw 4 circles in one direction. Don't touch your teeth when you do it. And if you see your jaw moving, right, that's a trigeminal issue. Try to keep your jaw still. Swivel your tongue 4 times in one direction, 4 times in the other direction, which again is the trigeminal nerve. And it's aligning the left and right hemispheres. And now we've completed the circuit and we've completed the presentation. So you're going to use single side nostril breathing, salt, lemon concentrate, and vinegar. You've all been emailed, or you'll get what I have is I made a tool of all of the brain activations. So I don't just do these, I do like 14 different activations that I've been doing every single day for 535 days. And my chiropractor told me that my spine has gotten more free in the last year than it did in the previous 11 that I was seeing him, because I'm increasing the electrical conductivity of my brain, and it's decompressing the tissues, because now the tissues have more oxygen, which means you can switch on mitochondria. And then when you do your breath holding, you're going to notice that your Bolt score is going up, your breath holding is going up, and you're maintaining immense focus and clarity. And you're going to be smarter, and things are going to start happening to you where you're like, wow. And it really shouldn't take more than about 2 weeks to feel the difference. However, one more thing, I invite you all, and this is why you should be tagging me and asking questions. Do this for 120 straight days, because it takes 120 straight days for one neurological cycle to happen. And in 120 straight days, your bone marrow starts to mature new red blood cells. Now, we do this when we're doing breath holds, right? Where the kidneys are synthesizing EPO, which is helping the bone marrow to produce more red blood cells, but it's less effective. Now you're going to be switching on your brain that actually works those methods. And now you're going to mature new red blood cells much faster, which means you're going to improve your mitochondrial function. You're going to have more mitochondria. Now, 120 straight days, you can't miss a day. If you miss a day, you got to start over. That's neurology. So give yourself the dedication to do 120 straight days. I've committed to 2 years, because it actually, in neuroplasticity, it takes 2 years to remodel the brain. So that doesn't mean you're fully remodeled. I'm only going to get to the first 2 years, because I still have issues to work through, because the healing journey never ends. So having said all that, I'm going to open the floor to questions and answers. Neve, I don't know, is there anything else I have to do? Neve
No.
is our helper today with
Yeah.
Oxygen Advantage.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, there's some questions coming into the chat box. Can
Oh,
you
I
access
finished
the
in an
chat box,
hour.
Brian?
I finished in an hour. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. We got about 15 minutes for Q&A. So if you have a question, you can pop it into chat, or feel free to unmute. You can raise a hand. And Brian, can you access the chat, or would you like me to read out
Yeah.
the questions?
You could read out the question, because you know where they are.
Okay. So Desi wants to know, do you suggest any specific brand for the inhaler? Do they have any scent, or is it better to have unscented?
Yeah. So we need a scent. We need the olfactory nerve to smell something. So there's Olbas, Olbas, or there are Boom Booms on Amazon, or just type in on Google Boom Boom nasal stick, and there's 4 different flavors. No vaping. We're not vaping. That would destroy the lungs. Or you could use a Neti stick. I would not use Vicks Vapor Rub, but you can use a Neti stick. So there's 3 types. Great question.
All right. Anne wants to know, when exhaling after the soft closure of the nostril, is it through the mouth?
Never through the mouth. The mouth is an emergency breathing system. And I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it. This is who I am. If anybody tells you to breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth, don't work with them, because it's not smart. The mouth, you're not supposed to exhale through the mouth. You get less amplitude in the diaphragm if you breathe out through the mouth, and you're not going to produce enough nitric oxide either. So there's no function, there's no benefit to breathing through the mouth. God gave you a nose for a reason, and you want to be able to breathe through a comfortable and open nose at all times. And mouth breathing, those are one of the things I call profaning the mysteries of breathing. It's like the game of telephone. The masters knew how to breathe through their nose, and then someone somewhere said, oh, what if I breathe out through the mouth? It's just incorrect information.
All right. Chris wants to know, how do I know if I'm overdoing the breath holds during runs? I want the benefits, but don't want to stress my system.
Good. Okay, here's my way. So Patrick always says, challenge, but don't stress yourself out. You do not have to push yourself to the brink because that one breath hold isn't getting you anywhere. It's a year from now where you're doing progressive, challenging breath holds that creates hormesis. And hormesis is adaptable, progressive stress. So, what I tell my athletes is if you do a breath hold and you cannot recover within 6 breaths, which I want them recovered in 10 seconds. So, I'm considering everybody in here to be an athlete or a recreational exerciser. If you do a breath hold and you can't recover your breathing in 10 seconds, then you've went too far. Maybe 15. So in the beginning, you might take you 15 seconds, and then you're going to work your way down to 13, to 12, to 10. And my swimmer, who's holding his breath for 3 minutes, he's recovering in one breath. He's holding his breath for 3 minutes, and he lets go, and in one breath, he's already back to baseline. It's 5 seconds. That's a high functioning nervous system. Remember this name, Matthew Sates of South Africa for the World Championships this summer. Next
Cool.
question.
Charlotte wants to know, she's firstly said, thank you so much, amazing workshop. Lots of people are saying thank you for your time. It's been an incredible workshop. And anyway, Charlotte wants to know, she's wondering if you could say a little bit more about getting the right electricity.
Okay, so these cranial nerves, they fire a billion million times per second. So getting the right electricity is stimulating the nerves in very simple neurology tests. So getting the right electricity is keeping your nervous system on an energetic level. You know, there's not science that shows us about the etheric body, right? Everybody has been through school. You have your 4 posters in the back, the digestive system, the muscular system, the bone system, and the nervous system. Well, there's a 5th poster, and it's most important, and it's above all of them, and that's the etheric system. And there's 72,000 energy centers in the etheric system, and they're called nadis. And this is why I love Huberman sometimes, because he'll talk about yoga and certain practices, and he's like, well, there's no proof. But he's like, but a lot of what they say you can't discount, right? So that's why I don't base myself on science. I base myself on training over 1,000 people and seeing what works. So I buy into that field. I buy into that there's a force field around me, and that every time I activate my tongue, that I'm increasing that force field, which is lowering my brainwave state. So just by regulating pressure in your cranial nerves, you lower your brainwave state and you keep your brain more into the delta and alpha state and theta state when you wake up. So this is where you improve your mental enhancement and your clarity, is that when you wake up in the morning and you do these exercises, you keep your brain waves at a low state. And then when you get to work and you need to be beta, you move into beta, and then you can move out of beta. And you don't stay in a fight or flight adrenalized response because you see 200 emails. So that's the only reason I can speak. That's the only way I can speak to increasing the energy, is by activating these nerves, which makes them increase their energetic output.
Great. Martha, she said she's loving the salt, using it alone before a run even, or is it also beneficial with regard electrolyte balance?
Okay. So I don't use salt for electrolytes. In fact, I don't swallow the salt. I don't believe you should swallow salt. I think you can get your electrolytes from an organism called marine phytoplankton. I don't swallow the salt. I put it on my tongue, I get it in my mouth, and then I take water and I spit out the salt, because salt is corrosive. They put salt on meat to keep meat preserved. So if you eat salt, forget about the electrolytes that are in the salt. What about the corrosion that it's causing? Now that's where science can be wrong sometimes or misguided. Everyone says, oh, I need to have the study. Yeah, well, the study will say, oh, you're getting electrolytes from the salt, but the study neglected to say that salt is corrosive and that it's going to create inflammation and deeper acidity in your gut. So, and you can't just use salt before the run. That's less effective. You have to do, cranial nerve number one has to come first for the brain to organize and interpret. Then you do 7. Salt is cranial nerve 7. That's the beginning of the parasympathetics. Then when you energize 7, it energizes 8 and 9. Then you energize 9, and now you have more energy for the vagus nerve to be able to help you recover faster after the run. So there's a sequence, and you cannot deviate from the sequence. You could just use salt, but it'll be less effective.
Okay. Vladimir asks, any suggestions on breath alterations in order to increase awareness, presence, and prevent loss of attention during significant physical activities, such as a tennis match?
Well, we're learning all of that in Oxygen Advantage, and we're implementing it. What we do in neurology, brainstem breathing, is that when you have the right energy and the right electrical conductivity in these nerves, natural function is restored. And on a daily basis, you're going to start feeling less and less of that issue. So when you have the right electrical conductivity, your body restores your innate ability to breathe. You were born breathing perfectly unless there was an issue at birth, like the cord, or your mom smoked like mine did, or there was trauma during birth, which a lot of us have had, like a C-section. So the awareness is going to come from the nerves working correctly, firing in the right sequence, and then you gain the awareness by waking up every day and feeling the awareness. It's going to happen on a very natural level. We're trying to create natural function to restore itself. Now, when I was in the program, I stopped doing my breath holds. I did them for 5 straight years. This will lead to an answer to your question. So when Lois tested me on that machine and my end tidal CO2 numbers were 35 millimeters of mercury pressure, which is below average, I stopped doing breath holding because I said, okay, if my brain is not regulating pressure efficiently, I'm going to stop doing breath holding because it might actually be detrimental to my progress. So I wanted to just try the activations, and I stopped for 8 months. And it was tough for me because I really enjoy it, because I do feel good afterwards. And the reason I felt you feel good is because it stimulates you, because it's a stressor, and a stressor leaves you stimulated. So instead, I said, I'm going to back it down, and I'm going to try to cultivate as much parasympathetic energy and tone as I can. So I stopped, and I only worked on parasympathetic energy. I only worked on my brain activations, and I only did slow breathing. And guess what? 8 months later, in my 4th module, I went back, I got on the same machine, and she said, what do you think your numbers are? So I'm like, I don't know. If I was 35 in the beginning, I go, I don't know, 39. And she said 41. So now I was in the excellent range, and I didn't practice any breath holding. I only activated my brain every day with salt, with single side nostril breathing, salt, lemon, and vinegar, and 8 other exercises. And my end tidal CO2 went up. That's remarkable. That means it is all in the brain. So I didn't do any breath holding, and my ETCO2 numbers, which are most important, went through the roof in only 8 months. So that's the most important blood marker we need to focus on. And it's the hardest to test, unfortunately.
All right, there's still some questions coming in, but we could probably answer maybe 2 more. So
I'm good.
all right. So Kim wants to know, does sleeping with a mouth guard activate the cranial nerves and negatively impact sleep quality?
Good question, Kim. Okay. So it doesn't activate them. It stops the trigeminal nerve from being stimulated, which would create a fight or flight response while you're sleeping and wake you up. I use a mouth guard. And actually, a lot of times I forget now, and I don't need it as much as I used to. But I use the myotape. I used to cover my mouth because the myotape, my mouth would still open. So I was covering my mouth. And then Lois is like, well, you can't cover your lips because it stimulates the dimension of the cranial nerve 5, trigeminal, that's the mental branch. And when you cover your mouth, you're actually stimulating that nerve. So the myotape is actually what she supports because it goes around the lips. So now we're activating dimension 2 of trigeminal, dimension 3 of trigeminal. We're not stimulating it to overwork itself. But I still, like last night, I had my mouth guard in, put my mouth guard in, put my myotape on, and I use foam earplugs, not to drown out sound, but to stimulate my vagus nerve because there's a sensor in the inner ear for the vagus nerve, which we test in cranial nerve assessments. If anybody's ever in New York, I can assess your cranial nerves. So if you ever need that, I can give you an assessment, but I can't do it through the computer. Great question.
All right. Desi wants to know if the nervous system is the electrical network or is it connected to the etheric? And one more question, understanding that you are practically completing the studies yourself with your clients, which is awesome, about the nerves, numbers, stimulation. Is there a study side of your practice made about it?
Studies. There are no studies, unfortunately. Lois has been teaching this for 40 years. She's never once tried to do a peer-reviewed study because, like me, that's where I am. She just knows it works. She put a video on the screen. There was a little girl. The mom said, my baby can't walk and she can't talk, and she's 1 year and 8 months old. That's pretty late to not be able to walk or talk. Within 17 minutes of her tracing her hands with a Q-tip, putting Q-tips in her toes, giving her lemon, helping her to open her nose, in 17 minutes, the little girl was standing up, the mom was holding her hands, the dad was 4 feet away from them, and the girl didn't take her first step, she ran to the father. And we were like, oh. And then she started going, la, 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 because her brain started to come online. Because you were activating millions and billions of brain cells to come back into natural function. And we were like, what? So there's no study. So my colleague, Amy, goes, Lois, how did you know that was going to happen? She goes, I never know what's going to happen. I stay curious. She goes, but I know what the probabilities are because that's neurology. So in terms of studies, I don't think there's studies supporting the work, but there are studies that say when I touch myself and I switch on autonomic fibers that are my autonomic nervous system, I activate it. And I activate it through heat, through cold, warm, touch, light touch, continuous touch, stroke, compression. So I know if I turn these nerves on, I'm going to create millions and billions of nerve signals that's going to wake up my brain. And then all of a sudden, natural function starts to restore itself. So that's my greatest example, to watch this girl run to her father and then start to try to talk. I mean, in 17 minutes, but it wouldn't happen for us. The older you are, the more damage has been done, the longer it takes. That's why I'm committed to the process for 2 years. And Nave, I'm good. Neve, I'm good with more questions. So
yeah, I think, well, we could probably finish up with your final thoughts on nasal running.
Okay. So nasal running is your powerhouse. It's your supercharge. right? You have to think of yourself like a Lamborghini. Or forget a Lamborghini. You're a cheetah. I tell all of my clients, even the non-athletic ones, you want to be a cheetah. And the cheetah does not breathe through its mouth when it's running at full speed. To increase your anaerobic tolerance and to be able to buffer acid, you need to be able to breathe through your nose comfortably. And then the cheetah stops, the mouth opens, it's off gassing, but it's panting. And that's how it cools itself down. And then it sits, but it still pants. Then it lies down, but it still pants. You know how I know this? I'm a big follower of the Cheetah Enthusiast page on Instagram. I watch cheetahs breathe all the time. I also watch leopards. I go on YouTube and I type in leopard carrying prey into tree because I want to watch how the animals breathe because they're breathing perfectly. I don't watch humans because unfortunately, in the 8 years I've been doing this, I've only met two good breathers. Two. Everybody else is dysfunctionally breathing. So I watch these leopards carrying a dead deer that's 1.5 times the size of them. So I watch their belly, and they got the deer in their mouth, and they're not going. They're not holding their. Oh, I just got dizzy because that was an inhale hold, right? I just made myself hypertense, and I got dizzy immediately. They're not holding their breath on the inhale and trying to struggle to get up. They're holding the deer in their mouth and they're growling, which is humming. And the humming is stimulating the vagus nerve so they can stay in flow and then they can continuously breathe through their nose. And that's how they get the deer into the tree. That's profound. And then I teach my athletes to hum. So when my guy's swimming, he's humming to exhale. When I'm swinging, you might see me on Instagram and I'm always exercising. When I'm doing any kind of movement, I'm humming on the exhale because it's stimulating my vagus nerve, it's activating my vagus nerve. It's helping me to breathe out longer. It's helping me to maintain a high level of EtCO2. And then you work through. So let's say you're doing a bench press. You don't breathe in and out on each rep. You breathe in, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's a constant breath. So I can get 4 reps on one breath. Now people are like, what if I want to lift heavy? Well, I used to be a power lifter and my system was destroyed. I was a wrestler. By 46, my system was destroyed. It's why athletes don't live long lives because they've used all of their vitality. So as nasal breathers running, we don't want to overbreathe. We want to maintain our ability to breathe. Let's say when you're running, it's in for 3 and out for 3. When you're at rest, it's in for 3 and out for 6 or 8 or 10. I don't breathe in for 4. I use 4 with my pause. So I inhale for 3 because if you have an open nose, you're going to get enough air in 3 seconds. Then you're going to pause, which is not holding my breath. That's the transition from the lungs or the diaphragm moving down and the lungs inhaling to 3. The transition, the 4, is the pause. And then I want to breathe out for at least double my inhale because I want to, the longer I breathe out, the more I activate my vagus nerve, the more I maintain high EtCO2 levels. And I know the science says the perfect breath is in for 5 and out for 5. I don't agree and I wouldn't teach it. So when I'm running, I want to maintain 3 in and 3 out. And if I can't, I want to slow down or I want to stop so I can recover my nasal breathing. And then each day, I want to maybe add a little bit more difficulty. And each day, I'm going to very slowly progress myself. And I'm going to be okay with taking my time to eat the apple. I'm gonna love that apple. And every bite, I'm going to chew it as many times as I can. And I'm going to make it soft and I'm going to taste it. And then I'm going to swallow it. I'm not going to bite into it, chew it really fast and swallow it. So in order to be a better athlete, you take your time and you use the hormetic effect. Not every endeavor should be all out. In fact, very few should be all out. My athletes, they have coaches. Coaches don't listen to this. They're not on board with this, but my athletes are. So they do it in their own time. And now my swimmer, Matthew, he said, Bryan, I used to do intervals and I would start to feel nauseous. When coach said we were going to do intervals, I was like, why? He's like, because I knew I was going to have a really hard time breathing. I'm like, what about now? He goes, well, I don't have a hard time breathing, so now I enjoy it. I'm like, you enjoy intervals? He's like, yeah. I said, you watch. The coach is going to watch you swim and he's going to say, Matthew, you're not working hard enough because he's making it look too easy. And you know what? He did a time trial. They did all out 10 laps. And the first 2 laps, he was able to maintain from lap 1 to lap 10, he was able to maintain the pace that they wanted him at. So the coach said, you weren't going hard enough in laps 1 and 2 and 3. And he said, no, I was going all out. And he's like, yeah, but it didn't look like you were. And I'm like, yes, that's it. So now when he gets on the block in the world championships, he's not going to be stressed. He's not stressed anymore. That's why we're here, for mental enhancement and mental performance. So now he's taught himself how to overcome those kinds of stresses by maintaining nasal breathing, by maintaining his ability to hum, and always matching his breathing to the appropriation of his exercise. That's how you teach an athlete. That's how you should teach yourself. Cool.
All right, cool. Thank you so much, Bryan. I think we can wrap it up there.
Nice. So I hope my final words were good enough, but I want to thank everybody for being here. I have no idea how many people were here, but you're all beautiful, smiling faces. Remember, you're perfect. You're beautiful. Nothing's wrong with you. There's only room to expand. Don't even think of yourself as improving. Think of yourself as constantly expanding. And no matter how old you are, you can make significant changes to improve your longevity. And when you activate your cranial nerves and your HRV goes up through the roof like mine has, you will live a lot longer and a lot more harmonious life, because that's why you're here, to remember who you truly are, which is the truth. Peace and love, everyone. Have the day you deserve.